Really hard to make heads or tails of what's going on in Washington, D.C. these days because of the lame duck session that's going on with the Democrats. And I'm sorry, a little slip. It just comes out like that. And, of course, the DREAM Act is one thing, and the tax deal and the rest of it that's going on. And then putting Fred Upton from Michigan up there, the guy who brought us the ban on the incandescent light bulb and put him in charge of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Well, we'll talk about all of this with one of our favorite congressmen from Iowa. It is Steve King, who happens to be on the line with us. Congressman, how are you?
I am doing fine, Phil, and I'll tell you what comes to mind after that wonderful introduction is you're going to have a freshman class of about 87 that you can choose some extra favorites from as well. Yeah. And I am doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's going on with these folks? I mean, we got let's talk about the Fred Upton thing. I don't know how you feel about that, but the guy helped ban the incandescent light bulb. Now we're going to put him in charge of all issues, including global warming.
Yeah, that concerns me a little, Phil. It wasn't where I asked that we go with that. I would like seeing Joe Barton serve.
Yeah, me too.
He served one term as chairman. I did a great job there. He's a scrapper. He puts up a fight, and he understands this environmental component and the commerce side of it. It looked like the leadership must have just come down on the side of there will be no waivers for extensions and term limits for chairs, and go straight with seniority. That's how every one of the chairmanships broke out, and that's what we have. Now we have to figure out how to do the best we can with what we have to work with.
Let's talk about the tax deal. I wasn't crazy about that thing either. I think that the Republicans are compromising way too early. I don't know what you feel about that, but it looks like it's going to be dead anyway. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats aren't going to go for it.
That is what it looks like, and my position on it is to add some clarity to this. That said from the very beginning, I lean no on it, and I could take some of the pieces apart. But the $56 billion in unemployment over the next 13 months, if you really want to grow an economy, it doesn't work to stagnate an employee base by paying them not to work. Businesses need to be able to hire people to go to work.
That's right.
And the second component of this is only a 2-year extension of the tax brackets. That doesn't give us enough certainty that it's going to free up capital for investment. I can't think of a business endeavor out there that would give you a return on investment in 2 years, but if there are some, they already invested it and did what they could before the tax brackets changed. So I don't think we get enough kick out of it on the top side. I think the unemployment is too expensive on the other side. The good part of it is there is some direction on the death tax. It's not enough to suit me, but it's better than watching this thing trigger at 55%.
Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, it really is brutal for estates over $1 million. So what happens now, I guess, is we go back to the drawing board. You guys will come in as the majority in the House in January, and I would presume that you will pass in short order an extension of all the Bush tax cuts, that you'll send it to the Senate, and then the Senate will have to go to these 21 Democrats who are going to be up for re-election in 2012 and say, hey, you want this hanging around your neck in the next election, or do you want to vote for this and we get enough votes that we can override a presidential veto? Is that how you see things shaking out?
I don't know if the president will actually veto this because he's going to be working to get reelected in 2012 too.
Right.
So that's one scenario. Another one is they come back and negotiate over the weekend and produce something that's more palatable. But I don't think you can go down into the Democrat side and convince them by making concessions on their side, like increasing unemployment benefits longer, enough to get their votes. And they've already moved so far towards the Democrat side, they're going to be losing votes on the Republican side. So it is a tough conundrum to be in. But I agree with you that if it doesn't get done now, then the first bill that comes out of the House, H.R. 1, will be the one that makes those 01 and 03 tax brackets permanent and may abolish the death tax, which it should do. Then they send it over to the Senate as a standalone and see how Harry Reid deals with that and how the president deals with it. But the initiative would be for the first time on that of the Republicans and on that of free enterprise.
We're talking with Congressman Steve King of Iowa, and I got to say that you've been on the front lines of this immigration issue, and the DREAM Act, which looks to be it passed the House yesterday, and then it's going to the Senate. It looks like it's going to be stalled a little bit in the Senate. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I haven't read your position on this, but I'm assuming you're probably where I am. I think there are probably some kids who have been dragged over here through no fault of their own that we may need to take care of and maybe see what we can do about helping some of these folks. But this bill was a bad bill, was it not?
It's an amnesty bill, Phil, and I stood and fought it all day yesterday. We got a late notice that they were going to take it up. I think the notice came about 10:30 in the morning. I was tied up in a meeting and didn't get out of there until after that time. And that they were going to have a rules meeting on it. So the bill that there were 4 different iterations of it too that were floating around here. They kept switching them out. And at 3:00 in the afternoon, with a notice that maybe it was at 10:30, they took it up in the Rules Committee and passed a same-day rule with no amendments allowed, no motion to recommit, no procedures that allowed anyone to try to improve it or perfect it. It was Nancy Pelosi's version, dropped on the floor of the House with 30 minutes of debate on the bill on each side, and then pushed through and passed. And it was fairly close, 216 to 198. It was designed, I think, to provide some momentum so Harry Reid could have a closure vote on it that was, I thought, would be today, and I haven't heard that that's actually happening. So they didn't get the momentum they were after. 38 Democrats defected on Nancy Pelosi, and most of them are the ones that she forced to walk the plank on many of those San Francisco agenda items. And they're not very happy going home for the last time from their service here in this Congress, having lost their seats because of a San Francisco agenda that was force-fed to them. And so they paid the price for voting for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker, and they're defecting from her in these votes on a regular basis.
Yeah, and the thing about it is they can, for all intents and purposes, if the Republicans stick together in the Senate, they can block this thing with the 42 votes, can they not?
Oh, yes, they can, and that's the counts that we have. The vote count that we have is 42, and we also have a list of around 10 to 14, of which about 2/3 of them are leaning no. They're undecided yet. So I don't think Harry Reid can put those votes together. But you never say never in this business. You got to watch closely. There's sweeteners that they might be adding on to get some of those votes. And I think there are a high number of Democrats that will be facing the voters in 2012. It makes this scenario where Harry Reid's lost a lot of his power in this past election, and he'll be losing more of it as it gets closer to the 2012 elections, and the Democrats seek to position themselves to hold their seats in their reelection effort.
So what do you think we should do? I mean, if you got a kid who was dragged over here at the age of 2, and they've made good grades and they want to go to college, are you open to finding some way to allow some of those kids stay? And I'm not saying let their parents stay, because that's the problem with this chain migration and the rest of it. But, I mean, would you agree that we need to make some concessions there, or just no?
Well, the problem with making concessions there are that you take the lid off the pressure cooker and let some steam out. And we're not addressing the real problems that we have. And so what I've insisted is that we do enforcement first,
right,
before we make concessions. And that means to stop the bleeding at the border and shut off the jobs magnet, put an end to sanctuary cities, establish the foundation of respect for the rule of law so that there's an expectation that it will be enforced. And once that's established, it'll take some time to do that. Then we can step back and objectively take a look at what we might do for some of these special circumstances.
I mean, that's a very reasonable thing to do. See, the thing about it is, that the liberals, which is mostly who's for this amnesty thing, although there are some Republicans for it, but they have historically played the other side. Well, let's get this and we'll do it all together, like they did with Reagan back in '86. I mean, so we're going to close the border. If you give amnesty to 2 to 3 million illegal aliens, he went along with it, and we saw what happened. They never closed the border. So what is the deal? Did we not appropriate money several years ago during the Bush administration to build the darn fence, as John McCain says? Haven't we appropriated the money? And if so, why hasn't the fence been built?
Well, we did appropriate the money, and we did pass the Secure Fence Act, and I actually went down physically on 2 occasions and built fence with my hands so I could be there to help nurture that along. But what has happened is that some of the interests that are speaking up for communities along the border and pro-amnesty people have decided to undercut and undermine and weaken it so that they don't get the fence built the way it was directed. We know if there's down at San Luis in the southwest corner of Arizona, just south of Yuma, they have triple fencing down there. And as near as I can determine, that fencing has never been defeated. And so I argue, let's build it, and it doesn't have to be 2,000 miles. Build it till they stop going around the end.
Well, that's what they said, and they said, well, look, if the thing about it is you build this and they'll just go around it. Not if there's no around it to go around.
Well, that's right. I asked one of the top people in the Border Patrol and testifying before the committee one day. It happened to be in Ellis Island, and I said, I always hear you need more boots on the ground. Why don't you tell me that? If I build a fence, you'll tell me that you'll see a ladder. There'll be a ladder a foot taller. What if I could build a fence from heaven all the way down to hell that's completely impermeable? How many men do you need to guard that? And he said, we still need more boots on the ground. So, what means I can't listen to that testimony and think that it's objective. It has an agenda.
Right.
We need to look at our assets and see where the best application of those assets are. I think it is in a fence, a wall, and a fence. That would cost about $2 million a mile. Right now, we're spending $6 million a mile to guard a border that we're stopping maybe 10%, maybe 25%, no more than that attempt to cross. And the numbers of border crossers. This is data that just happened the first time I memorized it. It sticks in my mind. It's a little down now, but it was about 11,000 a night in illegal border crossings coming across. Twice the size of Santa Anna's army every night.
And normally we would call this an invasion, but for some reason we don't. I don't understand that.
Maybe it's because of lack of uniforms and issued weapons. But that's got to be the difference in it. We can just do better. And so I just want people to understand that. We have to preserve and protect America.
Right.
This nation has to have an immigration policy that's designed to enhance the economic, social, and cultural well-being of the United States of America. And it's impossible for us to be the relief valve for all the poverty in the world. And there are roughly 4.6 or maybe even as many as 5 billion people on the planet that have a standard of living that's lower than that of the average Mexican citizen. So that tells you how futile it is to try to be the relief valve for poverty. We really need to export our way of life. And one of the things that happens is when people leave the United States because they're directed to go home to where they are legal, they take with them the language and the values of America, and they're bound to improve to places like Mexico and El Salvador and Guatemala.
Right. And that's what they need to be doing, improving their own place instead of letting Felipe Calderon or whoever is the leader du jour to be able to open up that relief valve and let the steam off into the United States. If the steam builds up and then the pressure builds up, and then they're going to affect change in their own country.
That's completely right, Phil. And who's going to rebuild those countries if the vigor from them come here?
That's exactly right. Got to ask you one final question, Congressman, and that is, did you ever consider, or are you still considering, running for Speaker? And because we need somebody like you in there. And I think John Boehner's fine, but I've seen too much compromise over the years, and I think he's had his day. Have you talked about this? Have people encouraged you to do this? And is that an option?
Well, the subject has come up, and it's really not an option. I think this die is cast. The conference has voted and voted without dissent, and I think I could say not probably technically unanimously, but without dissent, to support John Boehner for Speaker. I'm committed to doing that. The work that's been done and the foundation that's been done here, the people moving up through the leadership ladder, we have to honor that effort and that ability to do that. And my role in this Congress is, and it has been for a long time, to be the conscience of the constitutional conservatives. And I intend to carry out that role in the 112th Congress to the best of my ability. And that includes working with and for John Boehner on these projects and Eric Cantor as leader and the rest of the people in the committee chairs. I'm gonna do the best I can to do my job, but sometimes you need some people outside of that circle that will stand up for what's right, and it helps those folks on the inside of that leadership circle be able to hold the ground when they need to.
Well, we appreciate your being there. Congressman Steve King, as always, a pleasure. Appreciate it very much.
I appreciate it, Phil. Look forward to the next time.
Thank you.